My parents were actually moving down to Trinidad. And so I tagged along for the year. The first thing that I saw was the physical segregation of the two communities, right? The wealthier and then the underserved communities. And there was literally a physical divide. Like we lived in a wealthier neighborhood, but quite across the highway, across the street, people were living in these tin houses or aluminum houses. And so the divide was really insane. And it doesn't really sink in at first, but you start to see it. It took me a few years to remember it, actually. Without knowing it, I think that was kind of the birth of our company.
From Six Story, I'm your producer, Diana Hong, and you're listening to REVUP Your Potential with Hilda Gann, the show where we talk with entrepreneurs in Toronto about the stories behind their success and the lessons they've learned along the way. And now your host, Hilda Gann.
Welcome, Hilda Gann, Rev Up Your Potential, the podcast that talks about business owners and their successes and struggles, the journey that they have. Today, my guest is Erich Ko from Hop In Technology. Thank you, Erich, for coming and joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
So, Erich, when we were talking earlier, we were talking about some of the great work you're doing. So I'm going to ask you shortly what it is you do. But what I love about what we're going to discuss today is that you had an idea and you went to market validation, changed the idea, and now it's taking off. You've got global connections now. You're doing volunteer work globally and making a name for yourself and for your company. And I love who you're working with, your co-founders, and now the fact that you're doing greening initiatives. There's a social responsibility that you and your company feel. So I'm excited to get in and start talking about it. So for those who don't know you, Erich, and Hop In Technology, can you just share a little bit about what your business is and help us understand what it is and just a tiny little bit about why you decided to go and do this business? And then we'll get into your journey from the early days of your entrepreneurship.
Sure. So essentially, Hop In offers a platform for logistics software. It's geared towards transportation and everyday commuting transportation. The reason why we're doing this is because we really want to help improve access to workplaces, helping both the business and helping the employees have a better commute and a better overall workplace experience. We have a bunch of different products and mobile apps that are coming out for this. We run it through an IoT system, but really the main thing is, again, the focus on the workforce. Now, the reason why we started this, and I know you said you love the co-founders because they're two of my best friends that I grew up with. We started this because we hated our own commutes to work to the point where we were just complaining more and more about it to each other. And so we just kind of sat down and said, let's solve this problem. We figured out that all of our friends and family had the problem too. And then eventually that this was a global issue, that almost every single person on this planet at some point in their lives has had a bad commute. So fast forward to today, we realized that it's a bigger issue than just simply the problem of getting into your car and sitting in traffic, that there are deep-rooted problems behind this that we can help to solve.
So well put. And I think, that our company, the company that I had with my husband before, was an engineering firm focusing on transportation. And my husband used to say, everybody is an expert in transportation because they experience it and they have complaints.
Exactly.
So you get it now, right? You got it. And the more you talked about it, everybody has an opinion about transportation. And when I was explaining to him that you were my guest today, I said, do you remember the 20-minute walk you had from the bus stop? Well, Erich's company solves that problem. Erich's company takes that 20-minute walk in the cold and really solves that problem.
Yeah. Well, I wish we could have helped him back then.
Well, he's supposed to help himself too. He's a transportation engineer. So as he said, everybody's a critic. That pothole, that public journey, everybody's got a solution or a complaint about it.
Yeah.
So when we were talking earlier, we talked about entrepreneurship. And of course, this is a show about entrepreneurship. And you said it starts, how far should I go back? Because it starts, I was born to be an entrepreneur. That's what you said. So tell us, what made you say I was born to be an entrepreneur?
When I say that, I mean, I was born to be an entrepreneur from day one.
Okay, you can go back to day one if you want.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask my parents, I was always that really high energy kid who was always a little bit too curious, getting himself into trouble. My parents were always having to kind of bail me out of things. Eventually, I learned how to get myself out of a lot of situations, which is the problem solving, I think. But yeah, high energy, really impatient, all of these things that I think way back we would have put a negative twist on. But today I think it's celebrated, right? And my parents always celebrated it. They always took everything my brothers and I did and turned it into a positive and said, how do you use this as a strength? Family is really important to me, right? Friends and family are everything. So my parents, everything we did as children, the way that they raised us, it's led up to this. And I think it's really built me into an entrepreneur. You know, when I was a kid, they made my brothers and I get a paper route. And I had that one like really tricky house with the dog on the chain. So I used to find really creative ways to get around him to deliver the paper, because my mom said, you can't just throw the paper. You have to do it properly. One day I took a steak from the fridge because I saw it in a cartoon show, and I threw it thinking he would go. And I wasted, I think, like a $40 steak. And I didn't get in as much trouble as you think I should have for that. But I think they applauded the effort.
I think that speaks to your uniqueness. That's one of my words in RevUp. Uniqueness is the key. And the support your parents did of identifying your individuality in that, rather than, trying to make you compliant in a certain way, really nurturing it. And I think this episode, this anecdote also speaks to your creativity, problem solving, and the quality that your parents instilled in you. You just can't throw it, right? You have to put it somewhere. So those are the two things that I heard that obviously is helping you, from day one into your business.
Yeah.
What a neat anecdote, and what a nice steak. Your parents obviously have quality taste too.
You know what? They put everything into us. Like really, my parents put everything they had into their kids. So everything I do, again, is for them. It's because of them. It's to pay it forward to the next generation. Yeah. The other part of my story is growing up watching my parents always doing something good, because anytime they had extra or something, then they would donate it to somewhere, or they would do something to give back. And like my dad sponsored a couple of sports teams. I think he bought an electric scoreboard for a football team one year, and they were always doing things like that. They had us volunteering at very young ages as well. What they taught me there was that you can make money and you can be successful, but it doesn't mean that you have to give up being good. You can have both, I guess, and then it just not to be greedy, and then that you can have both and you can have a really good, well-balanced life.
Yeah, and as we talk further, we'll hear about how this has translated into what you're doing for paying it forward for the good of the world, not just your own personal success. And that's the kind of people I really enjoy interviewing, is the people that do something not for the money and for themselves, but they do something, and the reward of being successful is to say, hey, let's give to our community. And that's something that I've always believed in, is that when you're doing good, you share that good with others.
Of course, yeah. No, and the great thing too is, like, my parents, to kind of add to that again, as I got older, they never pressured you into doing anything. They pushed you, but they never pressured you. So we did a lot growing up. Like, we played a lot of sports. We played music. I was on student council. I think I was in debate club one year. But when it came time for university too, I wasn't ready to go, and there was no pressure. I mean, my parents said, you have good enough grades, you can get into a good school, look at a professional faculty and things, right, eventually. But I decided to take a gap year, and they were totally okay with that. At the time, my parents were actually moving down to Trinidad to where my mom was working with RBC and doing Caribbean banking. And so I tagged along for the year. I ended up having a lot of fun. I played professional rugby that year in the Caribbean leagues. And, my dad and I went adventuring a bit. I got to volunteer and things. Without knowing it, I think that was kind of the birth of our company. Because the first thing that I saw was the physical segregation of the two communities, right? The wealthier and then the underserved communities. And there was literally a physical divide. Like, we lived in a wealthier neighborhood, but quite across the highway, across the street, people were living in these like tin houses or aluminum houses. And so the divide was really insane. And it doesn't really sink in at first, but you start to like see it. It took me a few years to remember it, actually. And then the other thing there was, with the people from the underserved communities, you could really see that they were a community. right? Everybody else in the wealthier communities kind of live their own separate lives. But these people you would see standing on the side of the road in the morning, and anybody, if they had a car, would come and pick them up and take them to work with them, right? You give a few dollars for gas money here and there, but it was really like a sharing economy and really, really a community down there, which is what I thought was really cool. And that's originally what we wanted to start with Hop In, was the community. There were a host of issues that we faced. Our first mobile app was a disaster. It was like a hitchhiking app and it was terrible, but we still build off of that idea to this day.
So that was the premise of the current business. Take us through that journey of deciding, because you said that like currently Hop In is one technology. You graduated, you kept touch, you have your friends who are your co-founders. Tell us about that. And then how did you decide, oh, we need to start a business? Are they entrepreneurs too? Or did you just say, hey, come on, join me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, so our CTO, Erwin, he's actually one of my little brother's best friends from, I think, when they were like 8 years old or something. We grew up together. Our COO, my other co-founder, Boyd, we met in grade 9. We've been friends ever since. And I don't know, it just kind of gradually happened that we started to complain more and more about our commutes to work. I mean, like Boyd was driving across from Ajax all the way to Vaughan every day for work. I was walking 20 minutes, taking a GO train, and then taking the subway or walking up again if I didn't want to spend the extra money, because I could spend upwards of like $35, $40 a day commuting, right? And then Erwin physically moved himself downtown because he just couldn't do it anymore. So we've had every experience that you can have commuting, right? And it was terrible. It was taking a toll on us already. I was working in the government at the time. I actually had been with the Legislative Assembly for about 5 years. I loved the job, hated the commute, and I was already starting to feel the wear and tear. I'm not even 30 yet. And so I can't imagine what it's like to do that for 40 years, right? And I think that idea sparked Hop In, and it was me, I'll be honest, that kind of dragged them into this. I have this habit of not sleeping a lot, which all my friends and family will tell you they're concerned about all the time. But
I listened to your latest podcast, and the anecdote was what time you shared the epiphany that you had. Can you share that anecdote?
So, yeah, that's where this is going. It was about 3 or 4 in the morning, and I was actually sleeping, and I like sprung up from my bed, and I was like, I've got it. So I called Boyd, and I said, I have this idea. We have to do this company. Like, we have to. And then there was a pause, and then he says, okay, this is a good idea. I'm going to go back to sleep, and I'm going to call you back in 3 hours when I wake up. No answer. He did call me back, and that's why we kind of started. And then we gave Erwin a call and said, we need to add tech to this. I know that you've had this problem too. Are you willing to be broke with us for 3 years to try? And Erwin actually, he was in school. We were both in school. I didn't actually start my degree until I was about 23. So I just graduated in 2019, and Erwin just graduated last year, I believe. So he was in school while we were doing the company. I don't know how he did full-time school, because he was doing like stats, math, and comp sci at U of T while running this company with us and building it. But yeah, it's been,
because that kind of curriculum, like that kind of course, is really grueling in terms of the hours and the labs and stuff.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, they were crazy enough to join me, and I don't know. I don't know why to this day, but I'm thankful.
Oh, you must know why. No, like, yeah. What do you think is the reason they decided to join you?
Well, we're really close, right? And we speak candidly all the time. One of the things they said is because I'm crazy enough that even if they don't believe in the idea, they trust that I'll kind of take them in a certain direction. And just the same, I have all these great ideas and these crazy ideas, but they're way better at executing on things than I am, right? Yeah. They take all of my crazy ideas that nobody else understands, and they say, okay, so this is how we materialize it. This is the path to actually making it tangible. So we work in tandem all the time, the three of us. It's really, really cool. And I think they just believe that I will something through, or just power my way through to something. And they just need to come and pick up all the pieces of the, whatever things I've shattered along the way.
It's so important in a partnership that, you get along, because what starts off as great can then end up being friction, and the breakup is sometimes really bad. But what I'm hearing you say is, I have these great ideas, and I have people who know me, understand me, and compliment me. So together we're more powerful. Like with my ideas, if I don't have people who can execute them. If I don't have people we can communicate effectively with, we will not have a better product. And so this collaboration effort really probably helps Hop In get off the ground. Were there other things that you thought about? Because I mean, this is your origin story, right? This is what we decided to do. But were there some other ideas that sort of didn't kind of gel with the three of you?
Well, I'm going to be perfectly honest. The first thing we thought about like years and years ago was opening a bar eventually. And that was like our thing. We're going to open a bar and all the friends are going to come and have beers with us and hang out. And then we realized we could do more.
Well, you can do that afterwards, like
Yeah,
Wayne Gretzky
exactly.
opened a bar afterwards. You can have a Hop-In bar after.
You'll be the first one invited.
I'll be there, but it's white wine that I drink, not beer.
Got it. Yeah. No, we had a few ideas. Another one that we eventually want to come back to is actually affordable childcare as well, because our whole vision and the mission of Hop In, which is the same as our mission in life, and I'm lucky enough that these two people share my mission with me in life, is to improve the quality of life of your everyday life. I played football growing up and hockey, and my dad always said, if you do your job and you do the small things right, the big things will happen. Right. So we want to help people improve the small things in their life, the everyday habits that we hate or commuting, childcare, things like that. And those were quite literally listed as some of the worst things in your daily activity.
Mm-hmm.
We just researched it. So we decided to start with commuting because we think, we still think to this day that transportation touches on every other sector, every other piece of your day.
Well, it is part of everybody's daily life. Even if we're walking from our office to our kitchen, that's still a commute, right? And now it's a mental health commute because there's no transition, right? So whatever we do from a transportation point of view really impacts on our lives, and these long commutes and the fact that people now are buying houses far away because they assume that post-COVID that they will be able to work remotely some of the time. Now they can afford something, and a commute only twice a week or 3 times a week will be different, right? Yeah.
But I'll say that there's not really an idea that we haven't gelled on yet. There are a lot of no's my way because I throw 100 ideas their way every day. But nothing we haven't gelled on. It's maybe just, let's put it to the side for now and work on it next as our next company. And there will be a next company regardless of this. Yeah.
Oh, I can hear. I think your mission or your mission of doing, touching the lives and improving the lives will have offshoots of what you're doing for sure. For sure. Okay. Any other things that really kind of gel to make you the entrepreneur that you are today, that you can recall from your growing up that really made the difference? I think you mentioned your grandmother being an influence in your life. Maybe we should share a little bit about that, eh?
My grandma, the greatest person that I ever knew.
I love how you are speaking so much about family. Some of my interviews, we don't even get into family because I think we learn to segregate our business and our personal lives. But it is so woven into who you are. I just love that. I love how you honor your parents and you value them, and they honored you. It's so heartwarming for me to hear about how they saw each of you, you and your brother, as very unique, and to nurture that and to help that explode into positive energy and helping you to grow in a direction that, is more in your passion.
Yeah. Well, and just off a little tangent here, my parents, they still are the ones that I go to for advice all the time. They used to sit at Y-Space at the incubator with us when we first started the company. They used to sit with myself and my co-founders every Friday night until 10 p.m. to work with us on this. Yeah. And they actually gave us the first 10 grand in seed funding, along with who I consider my family as well, a professor that I had at Ryerson. She's now at the law school there, but she and my parents gave us the first 20 grand to start the company investment.
Wow. That's good. That's nice.
Yeah. But back to my grandma.
Yes, let's talk about your grandma.
Yeah, she was awesome. So I grew up with her because my dad was the oldest son of the family, so we lived with my grandparents.
And where were you born? When you're talking about your upbringing, is it here in Toronto? Is it in another part of the world?
I was born and raised in the Toronto area. I was born at Women's College. I grew up in Pickering mostly, kind of the Pickering-Scarborough border. My dad They moved here from Korea when my dad was 11. So he's basically grown up in Toronto his whole life as well. My mom's from Winnipeg.
Okay. Because you talked about being down in Jamaica or where it was in the
Trinidad,
Caribbean,
yeah.
in Trinidad, so I didn't know where your roots were. So just,
No,
we're all probably thinking, where does this guy come from?
My parents are just crazy and they like to do all this really cool stuff. And I just get to tag along with them.
That's great. Travel is great. It really is an eye opener. And I think when people do travel, they become more inclusive and understanding of the different cultures, the nuances that each of us have as people and as cultures and as nations. I think travel is great, and living somewhere else is also, an eye opener and gives people much more flexibility and, adaptability. I think those are two. It's a great opportunity for sure. So back to your grandma.
Yeah, well, my grandparents were great. My grandpa's still with us. He used to take me, because I have three brothers, and we used to all have sports in different places at different times. I remember Grandpa was my buddy for sports, but my grandma, she really wanted to teach us to be what she called gentlemen, right? And kind of raise us in that way, because we were four really rambunctious kids who were fighting all the time and, breaking things. That's saying this is why we can't have nice things. That was us to the T. But no, she was great. Like, she taught me gardening. I still garden to this day a little bit. And then that I realized was to teach me patience, because again, I'm so high energy and I needed to learn to kind of calm down and let something happen on its own. I remember she used to hold tea parties, like afternoon tea, and have all of us like dress up in our little suits and join her. She just had to be more civilized too. So I it's not just my parents, but like my grandparents too. Everybody was kind of teaching us how to be better people from a young age. And I think if you really give kids that nurturing and that time of day, then it will prove like tenfold in the future.
Yeah. What you're sharing is really the value of good parenting in terms of helping people to really gain confidence and abilities to explore what they're gifted at and what they're good at. So how does a person who is got a lot of ideas, on the go, high energy, like gardening? Because, she could have instilled that and you say, there's no way, I have no time for it. And yet, you just told me you've moved into an apartment with a balcony and you're trying to think what you're going to grow. You say you have a green thumb. So how does somebody who tells me they're high energy like gardening, which sounds like it's a calming effect, how do you enjoy it? How do you come to enjoy it?
It's, you know what? I don't know if I can necessarily explain it, because it's the same as cooking for me. My mom taught me how to cook from a very young age. And her whole thing was always like, be patient. You can't rush it. And so gardening and cooking for me are just two things where I've learned to just be patient about those things. And, maybe I'll admit that I still have trouble translating that over into the rest of my life at times. But when you're sitting there in that moment, I guess what I learned is to be in the moment, right? Mm-hmm. And to really like take the time to enjoy it, because I will rush through life if I'm not told to enjoy the moment.
So maybe this is that one part of your life that gives you permission to slow down and re-energize. Like during COVID, I'm cooking 5 for 5 people right now. And at least 5 times a week. I need a break. And then on weekends, it's lunch and breakfast. So at one point I thought, I hate this. I just can't wait to just get back to some semblance, But then I realized, this is actually my time. Nobody's bugging me. I get to orchestrate the meal because, we're in cooking. For me, it's timing everything to arrive at the same time. And it could be 2 or 3 different dishes, etc. Yeah. So then I embraced it. I said, this is my time. This is grounding. I actually do enjoy it, but I won't tell them. But so maybe what this is your permission just to just bring it down a little so you can still kick it up when you're ready, right? Maybe that's
yeah. Everyone needs their meditation time, right? This is my meditation time.
Yeah, exactly. It slows you down enough. Okay, so you got the great idea, and you said, what, 3? Do you want to be paid? Not paid for 3 years? I think that's the term you said. 3 years. So take us through that journey of trying to make something happen and not, getting compensated for you. You haven't finished that. What was that considered a challenge for you guys?
So Boyd was the only one working full time because he graduated in 2015 from university. He was down in the States actually on a soccer scholarship.
Nice.
Yeah, he's pretty good. You gotta come watch him play. So he was working full time. So he was coming nights to Y Space. So he would end his day at like 6 p.m. and then he would drive over to Y Space and we would work from like 7 p.m. until 1 or 2 in the morning. And then he would go home, sleep for 3 hours, get up, and then his dad would drive. They worked really close to each other. So his dad would drive while he slept for an extra 2 hours in the car. Every day we would do that.
Wow.
You know, and 7 days a week, like Saturday, Sunday, he was coming to the office too. And Erwin was working remotely from downtown with us through school. I was in school as well. So for Erwin and I, it was a little bit better because we were still in school technically. I was actually still working part-time at the government originally. And then I moved over and I ended up working for a fintech startup in the DMZ while I was in school so I could learn about how to run a startup. And so like I was living and breathing that life at that point. I just kind of dove in to soak in as much as I could. I was going to class and then I was right back at the DMZ and I was like working. It was like, I'm not going to lie, I was sleeping on the beanbag some nights there. So it was a struggle, I think more so for them because I was used to not sleeping already. And then we're not without our problems too, right? Like we've had 7 or 8 major pivots in the company to get to this point. There were times when we did talk about shutting it down. Right. Well, the possibility of shutting it down or, you know what, one of us or two of us having to go on without the other. Again, I think it's a testament to our friendship and relationship too, because it is personal. And you already know from this whole podcast and all of our conversations, everything's personal for me. And the one thing that we always say to each other is like, let's not let things fester, right? Between the three of us, there cannot be this gap or this divide and no hard feelings ever, right? We always talk it out. And that's why it's good to have 3 of us because it's either the majority telling the minority, you're wrong, or it's one person mediating between the other two. And we always kind of find a way to like regulate our discussions or our arguments. But it's even like, you know, I didn't want to be CEO, to be honest with you. Boyd and I flipped a coin to see who had to be CEO.
Yeah, I thought he's CEO, he's COO.
Well, we were sitting there saying, okay, Erwin's obviously the CTO, but between the two of us, you know, one of us has to take leadership of the company because you can't have 2, right? And this is where I really have to give it to Boyd because when I lost it to the coin toss and I became CEO, and I say lost because
lucky for him, right?
Yeah, he and Erwin have really taken to that. And like most of what we do, even with the team now, is a discussion, right? And everybody kind of contributes and it's a communal thing. But when I have to come and put my foot down on something, they don't argue. They really, really back me on things there. So the few times that I have to do that, I really appreciate the fact that there's no fuss about it from any of them. You know, the 2 of them back me up immediately. And especially with Boyd, he's always had my back. In my mom's words, he's her favorite son. He really is. He really is a brother to me. And, you know, Erwin is the same, right? We grew up together and those guys, I think they trust me and I trust them with our lives.
It's nice when you do something, whether it's a job or in this case, a business, where you really love what you do and you love the people that you're working with. It makes the journey enjoyable, right? You can get through the challenges if you've got each other's back, you've got each other's support. And that's what I'm hearing. And it's wonderful. And I think you commented that, what do you do after work? What do you do after work?
Well, because the 3 of us don't spend enough time together, we during the pandemic, we play Call of Duty every night together.
Yes, sir.
With our friends. Yeah. We go and do that, or like we've started streaming movies sometimes. There's like the services you can do together, but we hang out all the time. It's like my mom actually asked me, she's like, are you guys all just going to move in together at some point? And you might as well just, I don't know. It's pretty much that though. Like
you got to buy one of those row houses with separate entrances, but then you gut it so it's just one big play space for you guys.
Yeah, that's what we need. Yeah. But no, like we can't get enough of each other, to be honest. I mean, you know, there'll be the odd day here and there where we need a break, as I'm sure every friendship needs one, but we basically talk to each other 24/7. We're doing something.
It's so nice. You said you pivoted 7 times. Can you share one of those 7 pivot times that really made you think twice about whether this was worth staying on or that you needed to pivot again?
Probably the most impactful one that still stays with me. So it was December 2018. We've already been working on this for a year and a half-ish. And we were running like a peer-to-peer kind of B2C company at that time, right? Trying to do it that way. Realized it just wasn't working and it wasn't going to pick up because the market for that is just too saturated. And it was more of a rideshare then anyways. We were pivoting towards like B2B logistics instead. We were looking at it saying, okay, like it's going to be another full year before we get any kind of traction, if that, right? Because we still have to build up the business model, validate it, and then hopefully sell something within a year, because anything B2B and enterprise is going to be a long cycle, right? So we had a lot of long nights and long discussions about that, to the point where we were kind of like, is this even viable? Like, do we need to go get jobs now and kind of work on this as a hobby, or even just shut it down? I don't think in my mind there was ever a doubt about the company. I don't think I was ever really willing to shut it down or ready to at that point. But it was a big discussion because we'd already sunk a year of our lives into this. We started at 2024 and it got really messy for a while. And it was like back and forth every day. Like we weren't even working on the company at that point. It was like a week solid of just, are we even going to do this? Is it even worth it at this point, right? Is anything going to validate? And there was a lot of self-doubt back then. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs these days come forward about their self-doubt and the fact that they're human too. But I've always been human. We've always been human. And we probably screw up. Like we screw up every day on something. We just kind of sat there after a while. Like at the end of the week, I sat there and I was like, look, guys, we talked about this. There's no hard feelings if this doesn't work out. We're still friends at the end of the day. Like we've always been able to separate friendship and business if we need to. And, it was a really big fight that we just had about it. And afterwards, like, I'm saying, look, it's okay if you guys leave. And they got mad at that actually. And they said, we're not leaving. What's wrong with you? And we got into another fight. and then we, everything boiled up again. But the really cool thing is there, and this is kind of, it's personal. It's weird that this is the reason why we decided to stay together as a company, is because an hour after that fight, when we all went home, Boyd called me and he was like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm fine. Are you okay? And he's like, yeah. And I said, do you want to come over and watch a movie? And he was like, yeah. And he came over and we watched a movie and hung out. And we just kind of sat there like nothing said. And then the next Monday, we all kind of sat down and got back to work and just started going through it. It was the weirdest thing. Like you can't explain it. There were no words, but you just kind of know, like you're all locked in at that point.
I think that, the airing of it probably allowed the tensions to kind of come out. And men and women are wired differently. And what I love about men is that they can have a problem, air it, and then they move on. They don't remember it. And sometimes women will long remember it. That wound will come back to haunt you 5 years, 10 years from now, because it's still festering. And so that's what I love about men, that they can do that. I was in the management of healthcare, so mostly women, and my husband is an engineer, but he had about 3 or 4 women. And at one point there was some difficulties, and he would talk to me about the problems and we would talk about solutions. And he said, oh, so many problems. He says, welcome to my world. My world is predominantly women. And that's what I deal with, is helping women communicate more effectively and to get over things that they get upset about, but they don't talk to each other. But they think women's supposed to know. Well, they should know they should do that. So I think for you guys, it's getting that out and then say, yeah, we're good. Let's move forward. And you don't need to rehash it again. So thank you for sharing that, because I think sometimes we don't realize that talking things through and resolving them can really make a difference. And as you say, that's a pivotal moment. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. So now that I've asked you to tell me what about your pivotal challenge, toot your horn, tell me about a success.
So a good pivot that we had.
Yes, pivots can be good or bad, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was a good pivot too. I consider it a win.
Yeah, no, it is.
Recently, and I think you touched on this in the beginning of the podcast, but we've really, really gotten into the social impact component of the business. And so much so that it's definitely at the forefront of everything we do. And it always was. Like we founded our principles off of some of the UN SDGs.
So for people who don't know what the UN SDGs are, can you explain? Because I know some people don't know what that means.
Of course, yeah. The United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. It's just basically everything that, and not to put it in layman's terms, but like everything that should be good about a company, about the world, right? It's like social policy in the most idyllic way possible. So the two things that we're doing, social impact and environmental impact. Social impact for us means helping people from underserved communities gain access to better jobs. And we're doing this physically by transportation because we realize that one of the biggest gaps to people getting better jobs or applying for better jobs is that some of these jobs are outside of their arm's reach, right? They're not going to be able to reach it. They don't have personal vehicles, or the transit systems would take them 3 or 4 hours one way. So simply by offering bus services, we're able to help them do this. We're able to help companies diversify their workforce to help them expand hiring pools if they've exhausted the options around them too, right? And we're talking, up in the industrial areas of like Brampton and Vaughan and things. We're talking out in Northumberland County and the rural areas that really don't have access to the same level of transit as a Toronto would. So really being able to help companies with that, but also, being able to put people from these underserved communities at the forefront and help, again, that quality of life improve. It's, teach a person to fish as opposed to catch the fish.
Yeah.
And then the environmental impact, which is our biggest material win right now, I consider, and the thing I'm most excited about, we actually just launched it yesterday, is a partnership with a company called EcoDrive. Basically, what we're doing is we're planting mangrove trees around the world to offset our carbon emissions. It's really important to us that we leave the world a better place than we found it, right? And that really, it's cheesy, but it stands true to what we're doing. And so I think the environmental impact there is really, really important. Like, we are technically carbon neutral now. I don't think it's enough yet still. And you'll hear, if you talk to anyone on the team, they'll tell you how crazy I am about this. But, we're looking into electric buses, right? The fleet's there. We're looking into, different ESG initiatives and things like that we can get into. We're looking at like LEED certification points and everything. We really, really want to push this as far as we can to give back more than we're taking from the environment, because at this point, we really have to get there. We're in dire straits, right? And if a company isn't thinking about their environmental impact at this point, then there's really something wrong.
And I think more and more people who are looking to join companies, good companies, they want to have a company that's got a strong work culture. My advocacy is people should love what they do and love where they work. So that means creating challenging, meaningful work for people, and creating a work culture where people feel included, that it's positive energy. And I want to come to work every day because it's energizing. It's a nice place. I love the people. That's the important thing. So number one, people should want to come to that work. But second of all, as important, people want to go to a place that shows that they are socially and, socially responsible, that they care about the environment, they care about the world, and they want to make it a better place. World Health Day just came out, and one of the things that the UN, or the World Health Organization, said is that they want to create a campaign, 2021, that creates a fairer and healthier world. And that's what you guys are doing. And that's what people are looking for. That's what individuals will want to come to a company that does that. So I can appreciate how proud you are. I've seen your website and your statistics that talks about carbon neutral and talks about the number of the miles that you've taken people and whatnot. I'm trying to visualize. So you've got this software system that allows people to do what? And then you're talking about buses. So do you actually bring people to bus? Like, does a person get a bus and get on a bus? Can you kind of walk me through that? I'm just trying to visualize you, not just the technology, but there's obviously something else that follows that.
So we looked at it and said, okay, we could run our own fleets. Fine, right? But the infrastructure is already there for that. And why contribute more to these carbon emissions and to putting more vehicles on the road when we don't have to? Mm-hmm. So we looked at Uber, we looked at the ride shares, we looked at bus operators and those like event shuttles, and we said we can use this, right? Okay. Because they're not using it for the purpose of the daily commute and for the last mile to connect transit gaps. So we do actually work with those partners now. We have a few bus partners as well that we use, and they're the ones who do the actual driving. We outsource to them, but we create the routes and the schedules and everything. Once we're done building our apps, it'll be run through there. The funny thing about that is we've been running the company like brick and mortar for so long, for me, it's about being capital efficient as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted to see if we could generate true demand before we started building products. So now we're building product this year. It'll be done by the end of October, all 4 products. But yeah, we run it through the system manually right now. Like it's Boyd actually inputting the data through Irwin's system that we're automating. It'll be automated by the middle of May. But then we outsource everything to the bus companies. And then we just kind of act as the kind of marketplace, you could say, between companies and buses.
I mean, you're using your software intelligence. I know you said manual for now, but to use that to really connect the people with the transportation in an efficient manner.
Yeah.
Okay, I got that.
To me, it's about building an ecosystem too, right? Like we have, through COVID, we've built up partnerships with a couple of health tech companies to offer like COVID safe shuttling and like symptom tracking before you board the bus and everything too. But True Health has been an amazing partner. They're actually from Aurora, so they're really close to home. But this ecosystem, I think, is important because, yes, we're one piece that's putting the transportation together. But then you can add on the health tech. You can add on, local businesses can advertise or offer their products or whatever they have through us, right? Everything that affects your daily activity and again, that quality of life, we can bring in and use transportation, no pun intended, as a vehicle for bettering your life. So we really are trying to build an ecosystem here.
You and I met early because you were trying to ask people about the premises that you had. Mm-hmm. And I was one of those earlier people from an HR point of view, is that, learning about a corporation. Would they buy this product? What would they do? And I remember my own thoughts about your idea and gave you some of my tips and workability of your idea to the buyer. And when we were connected for this interview, you said it's about market validation. And so I think that sounds to me, again, a struggle that you had, a problem that you had, and you had to overcome that. So you eagerly said, yes, Hilda, it's about market validation. Because I think it's an important story that really will help entrepreneurs understand that value of market validation.
First of all, I want to say that I still go back to the notes I took from our meeting.
I'm surprised you can find them. So you're very organized. Even though you have these great ideas, I'm impressed that you're organized.
So I have 3 Google calendars for different emails that I use. I have about 4 little black notebooks that I write in all the time. I have 2 agendas. I'm not even joking. It's organization to the nines. And then, it helps that our team loves to clean up Google Drive docs and things like that, right? They clean up the folders every month or 2. They clean up our monday.com every month or 2. We thrive on our organization. But, that does help the validation. But the validation as a whole, it's the most important step. I have 2 design thinking certifications, one from the Legal Innovation Zone, one from the DMZ. And the biggest thing I took away from that was always validation, right? Because ideation is great. You have the idea and things, but it means nothing until you've actually validated the problem and then validated your solution to it, right? And I remember our discussion because I had to go back and validate the problem again. Because I think at the time we were trying to solve absenteeism, and it wasn't the issue that we could solve with the transportation. So we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, what are the other host of issues that we could potentially solve here, right? And then what is tied to transportation? And I think the thing that I took from our discussion was validating against the problem that you actually want to solve, not just looking for something and trying to jam it in there and fit it in, because we were really trying to tie it back to the commute. And then we discovered that the commute affects the recruiting a little bit more, right? Recruiting and retention. Yeah, sure. Not to say that we solve retention even now. I think it's a bigger issue, but looking at what actually fits, what's necessary, not just what's nice to have and looks cool. And then going to validate the solution. Again, we were selling a service that it was nice. It wasn't necessary. And we did that for 6 to 8 months, I think, until we finally realized we were just banging our heads against the wall, went back again and validated again. And we've restarted this validation process. I think that's what a pivot is, right? We've restarted this validation process now 7 times.
And I think that's the important thing about a business. You cannot just think that it's going to work. Because if you continue to do that and you don't evaluate, you don't rebound, like during COVID, we've all had to reevaluate how we do things. And I love it when people say, they always put these roadblocks. Well, we can't do that because of this, and this. And there's all these excuses and some legitimate for why you can't. But then ask the question, if we had to do it, if we were forced to do it, like we were forced to in COVID, what could we do to make it happen? That's such a key question. If you can turn that around, you can turn the building the walls to block something to opening things wide to figure out what can we do. And when you told me that story earlier in preparation for the interview, I thought, wow, what a powerful lesson, market validation, because I don't do it enough myself. And I started doing it during COVID, and I thought, yeah, this makes sense. You don't sell vitamins because I think, oh yeah, people need this, they need to have a healthy work culture. But deal with the pain points. And the pain point is people come to me and they say, once they know I'm in HR, they say, oh, do you hire people? Do you help? Like, how do you keep people, you know? And I'm thinking, again, it's not, I can't just give you the fish because that's not going to help you. I can teach you how to fish and create, you know, a strong way to get more fish, not by just giving you 5 fish and hope you do something with it. It's really helping you to get the right things in place to catch 25,000 fish instead of giving you 5 fish. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that was powerful. And when you said that to me, I thought, yeah, Hilda, you still need to do more of that. Never enough. See, Eric saying never enough. I learned that. And now you teach market validation, right? You're a guru in it now.
I think I just tell people how many times we've had to pivot and fail before we can find success. And that I think always resonates well. But yeah, necessary pain, right?
So what are some of the current challenges that you have, or one of the current challenges that you have?
It's funny that the theme of patience keeps coming back into my life because our pain point right now is kind of like a hurry up and wait situation. We have a lot of really good contracts and things coming, a lot of good projects. We've gotten approval for a few of them in different counties and with different associations. At this point, it's kind of like we've built up a really good business model, right? And we've spent the time on it. It's starting to validate now. We're getting contracts and things. We're just waiting for a lot of the world to kind of return is one thing, because we have a lot of companies that are kind of looking at, okay, return to work, what are we going to do? But the other thing with it too is like there are still a lot of industries like manufacturing and then, you know, food processing that are working, and that's who we're working with now. But it's just kind of like a matter of waiting for them to kind of come around to it, right? The sales cycles are long and it's something that we knew we would have to wait for, but now that we're here, it's really a hurry up and wait situation. Even as we expand to other markets and other countries, it's the same thing, right? We're waiting for market validation to come through in market surveys. We're waiting to see who's your ideal customer persona there, because we could just go and sell, but you know what we just talked about is waiting for validation to really happen. So,
yeah. Now, all along the way, you know, you're the ones that are trying to build this up. You've gotten your startup seed money from your prof and from your parents. Can you share about getting funding? Is it, when do you decide you need to do that? Are there some helpful hints that you want to share in terms of getting funding? Because what you do is important, but you need money to make this happen for sure.
Yeah, and we actually are just finishing raising a pre-seed round right now. And I've realized through that process how important your investors are, and that like everybody tells you it's not just the money, it's what else, right? And how your vision's aligned and everything. But you don't realize that until you're actually in it. Because we had some other offers for more money and we couldn't do it because it didn't fit. It is very difficult to get investment. I won't ever downplay that because it was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done. But yeah, finding the right investor is really important. I think like you cannot cut corners there. And so like the group that we have now, the syndicate that we have now, they're all social impact investors. They really back the vision of the company and the good things that we're trying to do. They understand that we're going to generate revenue and generate profit as well, but that we have, you know, a good heart in our company. And I guess the point at which you know you need to raise is when you can either do it when you're bursting at the seams, I guess, and you have like way too much to handle. I'm not necessarily a fan of that. I've seen it happen with the other companies I've worked with. I like to say, okay, we've gotten to this point now. We're about to burst at the seams. You can kind of predict it. In the next 3 months, we will need the money. So I'm going to start raising now so that when that time comes, like right at the inflection point, we get the injection that we need to move forward. So like we had to bring the team on board, right? A lot of people we had were just working on sweat equity and you know, working nights and weekends for us. And we were at the point where we said, okay, we really need to move now. We're starting to get traction and validation. There's a lot of opportunity and like the 3 of us just can't do it anymore. And these people part-time just can't do it anymore. We need them full-time. So, you know, we went to the investors and said, look, we have validation. We have all of this in the sales pipeline. We have to build the product out. So we need developers. We have contracts waiting for the product. There's enough time to do it now. We're not going to be, you know, constraint for any of that, but we need to do it now if we're going to move, right? And you basically just kind of put it in there, the ball in their court, and say, if you're with us, you're with us. And we were lucky enough that this group of investors are with us, and could not be happier with them.
I love how and thanks for sharing this financial success here with us, because I think the message I take from that too is that money is money for sure, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to prove that you can make money. But the key takeaway that I'm hearing is make sure it aligns with your values. To me, having a mission, vision, and values is the foundation. Whether it's funding, it's clients that you want, it's the operations that you want, and to me, of course, the human resources. If you have a clear mission, vision, and values, and you build that, you have a strong company, whether it's the financial aspect, the HR operations, or even the clients that you choose. So, kudos to you. Thank you for sharing so much of your amazing story. I know you could probably have another handful of anecdotes, or, buckets full of anecdotes, but thank you for sharing these ones with us, Erich. Really a pleasure having you today, joining me. How do people get a hold of you if they want to talk more about your company, what you do, or just about your journey? How do they get a hold of you?
I mean, the website is a great resource. Cassandra, who's our manager for marketing, PR, and everything, like holding the company together, she's really good about answering messages on there. We're very active on social media, thanks to her as well. You can just search up like Hop in Tech or Hop in Technologies on any of the mainstream social media platforms. If you want to reach me personally, my Instagram is The Starving Startup. Otherwise,
it may be a misnomer later on, if not now.
My mom says that because I never stop eating. Like we grew up with like 4 fridges and another freezer in the house because the 4 of us just wouldn't stop eating. But yeah, that's where you can reach us. We're very, very active on social media. So reach out to us there. Definitely, the messages you can leave on the website, we'll always answer everything, because we just love to have these conversations. And like you said, or like your husband said, everybody's an expert on transportation, especially commuting. And we want to hear people's stories. We want to hear what struggles you're having and how we can help you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming today. I really, really appreciate it. And I'd also like to thank my producers from 6 Stories who will be showing you the final product of this really, really good interview. And I'd like to thank my people from my company, People Bright Consulting. If you like this podcast, put a like on it or comment on it. If you're interested in this, there are many more interesting people and their stories. So thank you very much to join us for Rev Up Your Potential, and stay safe, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us in this episode. If you're new to Rev Up Your Potential, please visit our website at www.revupyourpotential.ca. There you will find more podcast episodes, videos, and a growing collection of resources to help you rev up your potential. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.